Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second week of the Future of Business course. We are so excited that you're able to join us today. And I hope you're now in the swing of things and are making an extra special effort to connect with each other on the course platform. Remember that a large component of this course is the peer engagement, where people enrolled from companies in various industries. So it's a unique opportunity for networking, partnership, and learning that we really want you to take advantage of as you envision what a new normal might look like, both for yourself and for your company as well, as a changemaker company. While you might just see my face right now from the Ashoka side of things, be assured that our hardworking team behind the scenes is always available to help you on the platform. Specifically, my co-facilitator, Jean-Pierre, or JP, is always ready to support you on this journey and can also assist with any technical issues you may have, either during this webinar or later on. So if you have any questions for our guest speaker as well, and I've already seen that there are a couple, you can put those in the comments section right under this live webinar screen. And we'll try and have as many of them answered as we can, with the time allowing, of course. We are streaming live via YouTube, so there'll be a slight delay or time lag between YouTube and the NovoEd platform. So just be aware of that as we interact today. I also want to let you know that you can earn extra points for watching this webinar live, and this applies to every other webinar on this course. While it's on, you'll see a survey question at the bottom of this page asking if you're watching it live, so go ahead and click yes on that survey. If you don't see it for some reason during the session, try and refresh your page and I'm sure it'll come up. So without further ado, this week we're diving into Module 2, which is the business case for social entrepreneurship. And here to set the stage and walk us through this topic today is Dr. Frank Aswani, who has wide-ranging experience in both the private and social sectors. He's the CEO of African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, which is a pan-African network for social investors who are interested in collaborating to increase the flow of capital into social investments in Africa, and also ensure that capital, whether it's financial, human, or intellectual, is deployed as effectively and innovatively as possible for maximum social impact. Before joining AVPA, Frank held the position of Vice President and Director of Strategic Relations for 6 years at the African Leadership Academy in Johannesburg, where he led ALA's corporate partnerships, business development, and fundraising activities. He's also worked for the nonprofit Absolute Return for Kids, also known as ARC, as the Regional Director for Africa, and spent 14 years with pharmaceutical Eli Lilly, where he worked in Kenya, England, Switzerland, and South Africa, and gained extensive experience as an entrepreneur as well. Frank is a Kenyan national living in Johannesburg, South Africa. He holds a veterinary medicine degree from the University of Nairobi and an MBA from Gordon Institute of Business Studies at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. He's also a certified design thinking and design sprint practitioner. I really could go on and on, but Frank, we want to welcome you to the course today.
Thank you, Sharon. It's a real pleasure to be here. Really great to be joining your class.
It's really our pleasure to have you. And we just want you to start by sharing with us your professional journey as a social entrepreneur and entrepreneur, and also tell us about your work with AVPA. So over to you.
Thank you, Sharon. So you know, it's been quite interesting. My passion for social impact has been fueled by many reasons. One, my family background. I was brought up I'm a firstborn in a family of 5 boys. So as you'll know, appreciate this, Sharon, as a firstborn in any African family, you are put, it's an extreme sport on its own, where the expectations from the family on what you do and how you carry yourselves are quite high. And I was, in a state whereby I lost my father at 24. So I inherited 4 brothers and a mother at that age, and naturally had to grow up very quickly. So I became a giver and a nurturer at a very young age when my friends were all partying and driving to the coast in Kenya at will. I was thinking about how do I pay school fees and how do I manage my family. But that brought up some very, very interesting attitudes and skills in me. I learned a lot how to think about others, to grow. I grew up very fast. And I had to really become a lot more sensible as a young man than I thought I would at the age of 24. But that aside, also my experience of going to work in England was very interesting. Like many young people in Africa, we always believe it's green on the other side of the fence. And I left Kenya saying that I'm never going to come back. And I remember I stayed in a hotel for 3 weeks when I got to England. And then I got a house in 3 weeks. Miraculously, I had a telephone in 24 hours. Those are the days before cell phones. I had a landline in 24 hours. It was working, and everything worked perfectly well. And on this, I moved in on a Tuesday, and on the Saturday, I lived in a cul-de-sac with 7 houses. I went and knocked at all the houses and the cul-de-sac, telling, "Hey, my name is Frank. I moved in at number 7 across the road. I just wanted to introduce myself." And I moved out 3 years later. It's as much as I've spoken to my neighbors. And that's when my identity as an African was really put to test. I really started realizing how I love being who I am as an African. I love the fact that I know my neighbors. I know their kids' names. I know where they work. I know what they do. We've socialized on many occasions. And there's something very special about us that we sometimes don't appreciate until we're taken out of our environments. And from that point on, I decided that I was going to be an Afro-optimist, and everything I was going to do was going to be Afrocentric. So if you look at my journey from that point on, all the roles I took were very deliberate. 1, Afrocentric. 2, as Pan-African as possible. I tried to ask myself, how can I influence the continent to the best of my ability? And if you go to my Twitter page, I've got a line there that says, which is hopefully a quote that would go to every African, that says, "Would it matter to Africa that you're born and bred on this continent?" So that's kind of where my journey began.
Wow, that's very interesting. I love the Afro-optimist. I think that's something we can definitely all learn from. Whichever continent we're from, it's good to approach where you are with optimism and not give in to the pessimism that often comes with, with all the troubles that you see. And I think it helps to be solution oriented as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And on my question about AVPA, I think what attracted me to this role of AVPA as well was, first of all, I think I'm a strong believer that Africa deserves better on many fronts. People look at us and think there's a lot of problems, but actually, the problem that Africa has are exciting impact opportunities. These are Africa is a sandbox of impact in the world. If you are a true impact player, if you're a true purpose institution, and you're not in Africa, you need to be asking yourself why. There's no better place to be playing in the impact space than in Africa. Our problems, and depends on your mindset, are fantastic impact creating opportunities where you can test models that can be scaled across the continent. So I tell people, look at things like mobile money. M-Pesa started off in Africa. The world has been transformed by what mobile money has been able to do in financial inclusion and things like that. You look at the whole work around Zipline and using drones to transport blood and medicines. All those were tested in Africa. And it's partially also because in many cases in Africa, innovation precedes regulation. So you have a lot of space in Africa to test, not just to test new ideas, but also to shape the policy that then governs that innovation. And that's why I repeat again, Africa is a sandbox of impact on the continent, on the world.
Right. That's a really great perspective, and it's a good takeaway that I think our learners already have, that Africa is a sandbox, and it's all about the mindset that you approach it with, to see the opportunities instead of just problems. Yeah. So maybe just to get into our course material, our learners have really been on a journey learning about what it means to be a social entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur. So maybe just from your own experience, can you tell us what the difference is between entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship? And also the aspect of corporate social responsibility, where does that fit into that equation, if at all?
Yeah, so I think the common thread between a social entrepreneur and an entrepreneur is a passion to want to see a change, to want to see things being done differently, to want to solve problems. You are someone who wants to see transformative impact in the world. The difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur is just where you operate. An entrepreneur, you'll work externally to a big organization, usually within a small organization like an SME or a non-profit or an impact organization. An entrepreneur, for me, is a leader from within an organization who is purpose-driven. And increasingly, we are being asked as corporates and organizations, especially multinationals, what are we doing beyond profits? How are we impacting the world beyond profits? When you look at our P&L statements and our balance sheets and our annual reports, what more are we giving to this world than just milking it for profits? And an entrepreneur is that visionary from within an organization who believes that his organization could do better, who's dissatisfied with the state and trajectory his organization's in, and who believes that the organization could deliver more by giving either treasure, time, or talent to the world's problems, and contribute to see how we can solve them a bit differently. And that's the person who's trying to drive internal culture, internal perception, is a risk taker internally, because on many occasions, some of these people put their careers online, but is courageous, because leadership is about courage. This is the person who is dissatisfied when they go home to bed and they ask themselves, is that all I could do? Is it okay for me to just go to work and just get a salary and come back? Is it okay for me to just go and get a share option from the company and come back? How else am I being accountable to my children on a day-to-day basis in terms of making this world a better place? Am I okay with us making money as we destroy the environment? Am I okay with us driving past, looking at our supply chain, and it's purely male-dominated? There's not a single woman in supplier that we have. Is that fine with me? Yet I'm a father to a daughter. That's an entrepreneur who's dissatisfied with the current state of affairs and feels that from a purpose perspective, his organization could do better.
Mm-hmm. Those are really great questions to help someone to frame their own engagement with their business and see how they can make inroads into social impact, and just seeing beyond what they've been doing on a day-to-day business as usual kind of track. So I think those are really good questions to just help us think through some of these issues. And just on questions as well, one of the things that comes often is, how do you define a social entrepreneur? So just while we're speaking about our course content as well, one of the articles that the learners were reading this week is from a book called Social Entrepreneurism and All That Jazz. And that article gives several very interesting definitions of a social entrepreneur. And one that struck me actually says, a social entrepreneur is 2/3 change maker and 1/3 troublemaker. Can you share with us your thoughts on such a definition?
Yeah. I love that. 2/3 change maker, 1/3 troublemaker. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we have to learn that our organizations have to evolve. We've got to evolve because the environment changes, our stakeholder expectations are changing. And how are we evolving that? How are we becoming a learning organization? Okay, are we being deliberate about it, or are we being forced to become a learning organization? How are we being proactive about it? How are we using that opportunity to learn and be purposeful as a competitive advantage as we try and deliver value to and beyond our shareholders, just our stakeholders broadly? How are we involving our beneficiaries' voice in how we deliver value? And for that, for me, I think one, it takes someone who recognizing, once again, it comes down to leadership. You are a leader who realizes that we've got to change how we do work. But to change what we need to do work, how we do stuff, it means we've got to challenge our fundamental beliefs and assumptions in the business, and not just do tweaks to the existing strategy, because that sometimes doesn't take courage. That sometimes is where people don't look good in front of the bosses by suggesting smaller little changes, but yet in their own gut, they're unhappy about what is happening. How do you totally and courageously test your organizational assumptions and beliefs, the fundamental bricks that your work is built upon? And if you're not happy about that, how are you the one who puts up their hand and becomes a troublemaker? That takes courage. And for me, your entrepreneurship, a core part of that is courage and leadership. And you should be very proud actually to be called a social entrepreneur, because you are driving not just your organization, because a lot of people will look at what your organization is doing and learn from you. You're driving how business is done differently. And what we've seen, we can't keep going the way we're going. We can't keep doing business as usual. The world is changing. We are destroying the world in trying to maximize profits. And we've got to get to a point where we're striking a balance between profits and purpose. And I'm a big believer that you can do well as you do good. You don't need to necessarily compromise on profits. The days of when you thought that doing well was just purely the space for grant making are gone. I think there are now more sustainable financial options where you can do very well, make good profits, but not at the cost of purpose to the environment and other addressing social needs that we have.
Mm-hmm. Right. You mentioned courage, you spoke about leadership, and I think there's probably a whole array of skills, soft skills, if you will, which I think would probably be ideal for someone who sees themselves as an entrepreneur, especially when you have a definition talking about being a troublemaker. Maybe that doesn't suit everyone. Maybe some are not quite willing to be labeled as a troublemaker, but they do want to be change makers. What are the kind of social skills, soft skills, and even hard skills do you think it takes for someone to really start making progress on their journey to be a social entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, first of all, is self-awareness. You need to recognize what style brings out the best in you. How do you best deliver impact? How do you best deliver influence? Leadership is about influence. Okay, are you the kind of person who writes to influence? Are you the kind of person who speaks to influence? Are you the kind of person who negotiates to influence? You've got to first of all be very aware of how do I bring out the best in myself. Number two, how do I also then engage with the powers that be? So your political awareness is very important in any organization. Who do you talk to and what do you tell them? And when is the right time to talk to them about stuff? So you've got to be able to know, am I best placed to do this myself? Am I best placed to have someone speak on my behalf in terms of influencing their message? And once again, comes down to influence. You can influence at your level, you can influence above, you can influence below. So that self-awareness comes again once in the start of influence. As I mentioned to you, you need to understand you need to be politically astute in any organization. How are decisions influenced and made in my organization? And for me, the final thing is just emotional intelligence. How do I control how I do what I do? What are the things I do when? How do I manage my anger? How do I manage my failure? How do I best know who to talk to at what point in time? How do I use the various platforms that organizations give me to voice my opinions to the best of influence in the organization? And how do I build a movement of champions from within? Because this is also taking people along with you on their journey. And it's all about turning that wheel one step at a time, and not about thinking that you can necessarily do everything on your own, but you need to build champions to come along with you. And those champions could be your peers, could be people above, people below. It could be stakeholders that are not necessarily even within the organization, but you need to be politically smart to know how to put all of those pieces together.
Mm-hmm. The aspect of influence that you raised, it gives me comfort knowing that, there are actually different ways of influencing. As you rightly said, do you write? If you write well, you can actually influence, and you don't necessarily have to be someone who can give presentations with great flair, but there's a piece of the pie that everyone can own and say, okay, this is what I'm good at. Let me have that self-awareness, and let me be honest to say, these are my strengths. These are my growth points, and let me work with what I have. So I think it's very encouraging.
Exactly. And I always find another tactic that people probably don't make a lot of use for is if you can't get people to necessarily hear you, can you lead with questions? Can you ask the right questions? Can you get people to get to that point through self-reflection on their own? Because that's all about the learning organization is if you lead by writing, maybe there's an internal blog or an intranet that welcome employees thing. Can you just write something that asks the right questions, that gets people to start questioning their truth and how they align to their values, their personal values, their morals, the organizational values, and how they interpret all of those. So leading by questions is another really powerful way that people can get to communicate. So you don't necessarily, correct, Sharon, you don't have to be the loudest person, you don't have to be the tallest person, you don't have to be even the person who sits in headquarters. If you're multinational and you're a US-based organization or a European-based organization, you could be in Swaziland in a subsidiary of the business. But if you ask the right question that get people to talk, you can stimulate change.
Yeah. I think it's something that you obviously do well, because I think just in the few minutes we've been discussing, you brought up so many great questions to help us reflect and to draw out, instead of just telling us it should be ABC and being prescriptive. I think it's much more effective to bring up those questions as you've rightly said. So thanks for showing us how to actually to apply that as well.
Yeah.
So maybe just coming to the business case for social entrepreneurship. And I definitely want to go back to what you said earlier about being politically astute and navigating in internal politics. But I just want to take it from the side of the business itself. As a corporate, I can imagine that it's difficult for established businesses to actually embrace this idea of social entrepreneurship, especially since it can be seen as being a bit disruptive. So how and why should companies support their employees when it comes to entrepreneurship? And really, what is the business case for them to actually engage in promoting entrepreneurial practices within their employees?
Yeah, so I think also one of the things we've got to think about is in doing good, there is business value to be extracted. Sometimes people think that doing good is one of those things you do after you've done well financially. No, there's actually a lot of business cases that are being built extensively in this case. I mean, I'll give you a case in point. If we got gender equality right in Africa, would grow our GDP by 10%, would add an additional $360 billion onto this continent. If we just got gender equality right, okay? If you haven't, please read a report that was done by Standard Chartered called Opportunities 2030. It talks about something like a $14 trillion opportunity around just 3 SDGs. Okay, so the days of thinking about purpose as being the thing you do after everything else are gone. There's enough data and information now telling us, no, actually, you don't compromise on your financial performance necessarily because you're being a purposeful organization. And increasingly, there are frameworks. The SDG framework is a perfect framework for any organization to use to start questioning whether they are being a purposeful organization globally. So there's no excuse today for one to think that we cannot be a purposeful organization. And there's no excuse for any of us to look and think that we cannot be social entrepreneurs by being internal leaders who influence the trajectory that our organizations are taking. So there's more than enough. And I actually don't believe in just doing stuff because it's nice to do, because then there's no sustainability to it. I think you need to have very good numbers and business cases that showcase, that showcase the value of us doing things differently. So case in point, you're a company who are distributing a line of female products, and you don't have a single woman distributor in your supply chain. You don't have a single supplier or something woman. Yet that product is supposed to speak to women. How are you going to get the voice of a stakeholder in that conversation? How are you going to know how women think about how they use your products and stuff? And sometimes, yes, people say, oh, we'll do market research, but there's certain things that is cultural intelligence that you don't get from market research. It's unspoken stuff. And there's a lot of you can get by just having the right clientele in your network who will tell you, no, but actually thinking about it, that's not the right way for us to do. Oh, there's a festivities are coming up or something, or a holiday. We could do a campaign around this because women really get behind this kind of things. And I remember when I was in the pharma industry, we I always, whenever I went to launch a product in any country, I didn't use the traditional script of market research that the corporate gave me. One of the things I wanted to find out is, talk to me about the norms in this community, in this society. So we sold a couple of drugs for mental health. And I sometimes just went and find out. So talk to me about the attitudes and beliefs of mental health in this community. And in a couple of countries that I went to, I found out that one of the things that we did, because you generally, as a small country in Africa, you got your marketing strategy from the top. Is that this is how we're going to implement it, this is the message we're going to take, and what have you. And when, as an African, I thought, no, there must be a different interpretation to how we perceive and engage with some of these conditions. Mm-hmm. So I'd go into a country, and the first thing I'd put the corporate book aside and talk to a couple of locals over lunch or something. Tell me about mental illness in this country. What are the perceptions? What are the beliefs? And of course, you get a lot of thoughts. But I went to one country, and in that country, it was very important for people to get married, male or female. Okay. Very important. And a family's pride was when they offered their son or daughter got married, and the wedding was a big celebration of the achievements of the family in raising a good boy or girl. Yeah. Now, if your family had a mental illness, no one would marry from your family. Okay. So what happened was family members did everything to make sure that any mentally ill members of the family got all the care and support they needed. So our medicine was not cheap, and we had no medical insurance in many African countries. So I started talking to families who had mentally ill people. My strategy was talk to families about how we could support them to support their family member to recover. Okay, and part of that was, how can we as a collective help support access to medication where it was indicated. It had to be indicated, of course. And we had situations whereby family members would volunteer to buy medicine for these patients on different days of the week. Where people bought the medicine on Monday and Tuesday. People bought Wednesday and Thursday. And it went on until Sunday. So they, as a family, owned the wellness of that particular family member. That is not something that I've got from corporate. That would never have got from corporate. So you need local intelligence to do some of that stuff. So this is where, as a social entrepreneur, you need to start thinking differently. And influence is not always from the top. You've got to feel that you're confident and capable enough to influence from the bottom and from within. And that's a case in point where I say, but it takes courage. It took courage for me to go back to corporate and say, yes, I'll take the message you give me from corporate, but I'll localize it, I'll Africanize it, because my context is different. And also, I didn't have one message for the whole continent of Africa. There are 54 countries. Is how do I take that message to a particular country where the market has demands that I think differently?
Mm-hmm. That's so good, Frank. And I think it's such an eye-opener in terms of, you have to go beyond just ticking boxes and following scripts, as you've said, and, thinking outside the box to what is really relevant in the particular context. And just leading from that, we have quite a few corporates who perhaps have not had a lot of exposure on the African continent. So perhaps one question that is probably in their minds is, how do we, as an international organization, corporation, NGO even, how do we create impact in various African communities without, falling into sort of traditional and harmful practices or conventional mentalities that may still be present, like a white savior type approach and things like that? Have you encountered that kind of, engagement with Africa, and how could a Western organization go about approaching Africa?
Yeah, of course, Sharon, we could talk about this for hours on end, but it's very typical. I think if I look at there's the graveyard is full of a lot of corporates who came to Africa thinking they know what they know, or who came to Africa with the mindset of we'll go and we know what is required, or take a Western model. The graveyard is even full of African organizations that, let's say, moved from South Africa to the rest of the continent and we're not humble enough.
Wow.
Okay? Humble enough to go in with the premise that, first of all, we don't know what we don't know, and move from the point of being unconsciously incompetent to deliberately being consciously competent. Okay, so the first thing is humility. You've got to realize you don't know what you don't know. And yes, come in with the assumptions, but test your assumptions. And one of the best ways to do it is please give us some credibility in Africa for knowing something about our lives and where we live. So it's always really good, first of all, just find a partner, find a local partner. I think to have a local partner to support you in your entry is very important. So one of the things I do at AVPA, we are an investor-only network, and we support investors coming to Africa. Now, a lot of global investors are investing in Africa. We build a network of investors. One of the things we do is connect international investors to local investors. And that those collaborations are so important to help the international investors, first of all, just feel comfortable, be able to understand the risks better, be able to understand the cultural norms and differences better, be able to have a local partner that has as much skin in the game with them when it comes to the investments being made. And I think that humility and just coming in, finding the right local partner is very important. And then taking your time to learn and appreciating that Africa is not necessarily a difficult place to be. It's just different. It's just different, okay? And you need to adjust your mindset to how different it is. It's not for Africa to adjust to you. You need to adjust your mindset to how different it is. So, for example, we don't have as much data systems as the West have, but we have other proxies that you can use to get data to help you make the right decisions. And you need to adjust to that kind of. People are making money in Africa. People are making decisions, and they're using data to make decisions. But it's not the data framework that you're used to. So it's for you to adjust your mindset to what it takes to survive, to be successful in the content. And there are a lot of successful businesses on the content that are doing that.
Right. Well, it's a very interesting conversation, Frank. And at this point, I just want to remind our learners that you can earn extra points for watching this webinar live. So while we're still on, you can click on the survey button at the bottom of the page, which is asking you if you are watching live, and then you can submit that. And if you don't see it during the session, just refresh your page and it should come up. And if you have any problems with that, just reach out to our technical team. So Frank, just moving on to the life of an entrepreneur, can you just tell us, what are some of the obstacles, challenges, resistance that you have personally faced or witnessed when attempting to bring something different within an organization, especially in an ecosystem which may not be willing to embrace such change?
Yeah, you face a lot as an entrepreneur, trying to adjust to some of these things. So there's a lot you have to be willing to tackle in the process. So first of all, I think a big question you need to ask yourself: is your organization a learning organization or not? Okay, if you look beyond just what you're trying to do, are people rewarded for taking risks, for failing, for experimenting? And in this world of today, where there's no expert for the future and the world is changing so quickly, we need to be able to be comfortable running a lot of experiments. If you look at Amazon, one of the things that makes Amazon really, really successful is they run a lot of experiments. They're not the biggest company in the world by chance. It's by choice. But part of that choice is a lot of learning that goes along. They always say behind every overnight success is a lot of hours of failure and sweat and hard work that you don't get to see. Okay, so there's nothing like overnight success. There's people who have to take a lot of pain and struggles in the process. So I think as you think about it, is your culture of organization embracing and incorporating and welcoming of change and agility and new ideas? Because as you start thinking of some of the obstacles that would hold you back from encouraging entrepreneurship, could be anything from fear of failure, unsafe culture, rigid mindset, over reliance on past performance. So you find the people who are being rewarded and promoted are people who did well 5-10 years ago, but they're legends they're urban legends in the organization that are untouchable. But no one is celebrated for being the guy who's uncovered something in the last 2 years that has really moved the organization forward. And also then some of the political nuances that work within an organization, where it's either there's an old boys club of people either from the same alumni or same city, or there's all sorts of things that kind of create some of these things that then leads to a biased reward mechanism, what I call attribution bias. So you've got to know, and as you look at diagnosing your organization, where do you fall along all of those things that I've mentioned? And that will kind of give you a sense, and that's why I say political astuteness is very important. It'll give you a sense of where do you start, okay? Because you need to build champions from within. Where do you start? But in all of this process, what you need to be thinking about is, how do I create small and early wins? How do I do stuff that will demonstrate at a very early stage that this is worth us exploring and looking at for second and third and fourth time, as I build momentum and as I build more people to come and understand why we need to do things differently, as I build more champions from within. So that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking of building that network of champions, I would assume it also brings into play the issue of having sponsors and mentors within the organization. Can you just speak to the importance of those champions and what they can actually do, and what kind of people you might identify as champions for you?
Yeah, it's a harsh reality of corporate life is, you need to have those kind of people internally. It's very hard to change the direction a massive Titanic ship is taking if we don't have enough people in the control room to help you do that. But what's most importantly is, even if you're not in the control room, can you, in your own way, prove and demonstrate something along the lines of how you can save water in the laundry room and save costs at that point in time? You don't need to be in the control room if you can't get there necessarily. But in your own unit, can you start demonstrating how a different shift in mindset could deliver impact in a very small part of the business? Because the minute you're starting to influence the fundamentals of the business, profitability, purpose, and those kind of things, people will start paying attention to you. Because there are people who are paying attention to some of those metrics. And but you've got to be able to find the right people. And the right people, it's either from the areas of the business that they run. So someone in CSR who is external facing, who for him purpose is important, could be your champion. But you from the business need to be the one who should go and knock at their door and say, by the way, here's something that's bothering me that I think we could do differently. And I think we as a business could help you solve your problem better and make you look better based on the metrics you want to deliver. It could be someone in finance who there is an opportunity cost around something. It could be someone in public affairs who is struggling with the gas emissions record of the company, and you can do something to make them look better and make the organization look better. So this is where you have to be smart about where do you start and who do you work with.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that point about, making someone else look better and making the organization look better. I think it's a tactic that some people often overlook. And yet at the end of the day, everyone wants to be associated with something that makes them look good. Whether it's selfish, or not, but I guess that's just how we're all wired.
Sharon, you always should ask yourself, what's in it for them?
Right.
Yeah, what's in it for them? Okay, all of us, we all have, before we do something, we always ask ourselves, what's in it for us? Why should I do this vis-a-vis doing that? Because it's, in our minds, it's always a trade-off we're discussing with ourselves. Is if I choose to take my child to school A versus school B, maybe school A is closer, it has better extracurricular activities. I'm a big sports fan that has a better sports thing, so I want my kid to become a sports person. So it's always what's in it for that person. You need to understand what motivates them and what inspires them, but also within their functionality in the organization, how are they measured, and how is success delivered through their day-to-day work?
Wow, yeah, excellent points. I think some of those also lead us to the question that we have from Julian, who's watching, who's asking, what key levers can help corporate organizations look beyond just the profits? Profits are their main and sometimes only purpose or reason to exist. So can you share some experiences and reference in that regard?
Yeah, this is a question I think corporate organizations to ask themselves all the time. And one of the biggest things is, do you want to build an organization for today or an organization for tomorrow that will last long? If you look at the Fortune 500, for example, a lot of the organizations there are under 25 years of age. And some of them have just been killed by either innovation or those kind of things. And part of what you need to be asking yourself as a corporate partner at the moment, or any corporate, is how long do we want to be around? And for that to happen, are we relevant? Are we purposeful? Are we contributing to the greater good of the organization? And are we sustainable? And sustainability in this case is not just about financial sustainability, which is very important, but also are we being active and relevant contributors to environmental and other sustainability metrics that we're looking at? And I think that desire for corporates to want to continue being a lasting organization is very important, and what inspires you to want to do that. But also for you as an entrepreneur, are you happy to be on a dinner table with your friends to say, I work for Ashoka? Because when people think about what Ashoka stands for, you are proud to be part of the organization. If someone didn't know what Ashoka does and Googles what Ashoka does, they should be saying, oh, wow, I didn't know you're the guys who do this. I didn't know you're the guys who did this project. You need to be asking yourself, are you proud to be associated with that organization that you work for? So I think organizations have to be thinking about their relevance to today's community, whether it's products, services, or influence. Are they relevant? Are they part of not just their business community, but also their environmental community? Are their stakeholders happy? Are their workers being paid fair wage? I saw a clip the other day about Toys R Us employees potentially having their pension taken away because of some issue with their pension fund. Those are the things we need to be asking ourselves. I mean, what are the things we're doing to make sure that we're taking care of our people, we're taking care of our workers, our clients, customers, and our environment and communities? Yeah.
Great. Julian, I hope you managed to pick up some nuggets from those responses. I think there's so much there that you can use to actually start building that business case for your corporation to look beyond just the profits. So Frank, I just want us to move now to the aspect of collaboration. And I know this is a really big one for you and the work that you do currently. So how important is collaboration when it comes to maximizing social impact, and how best can corporates do this, especially in a world where each company is in it for its own interests? How do we get corporates to work together in the social space?
The reality, Sharon, is that the problems we're trying to solve or the opportunities we're trying to maximize are way beyond our resources can help us to do. The opportunities or the problems are outstripping the supply of resources that we've got, and we need to be waking up to how do we work better with others. In my space right now, in the social investment space, I'm trying to change paradigms of how we invest in this space and how we bring together different partners. So to give you a case in point, if you look at the SDGs as a framework, Africa needs between $500 billion to $1.2 trillion annually to meet its SDG targets. Traditionally, we've been reliant on aid, but aid to Africa is reducing dramatically, and government funding. But our governments are becoming broke, one, because of COVID, but two, it's just as economies have changed and shifted, tax collection in Africa hasn't kept up. So there's not enough government revenue. So we don't have enough money in the social sector to fund our social investment needs. So one of the most viable options we're looking at now is the private sector. But the private sector has not traditionally invested in social investments. And because they find them too risky, they don't have the right risk-return ratios and all those kind of things. So the world is evolving and we're learning and we're trying out new things all the time. And there's a lot of innovation coming up. So there's this new whole emerging space of innovative finance where we are moving away from the traditional grant-only approach or private capital-only approach to somewhere in the middle here, where you'll hear a lot of discussion around blending finance, where we're blending grants and private capital into investment deals, and where the grants are coming in to de-risk social investments, so that the private sector can then find this a bit more attractive. So let me give you a case in point. There is a healthcare company that was offering healthcare services, mainly in the peri-urban space. They didn't go to the rural areas, but the biggest need was in the rural areas. And so some people came and said, but hang on a second, guys, you're doing so well in the peri-urban space where you're offering low-cost services. Why don't you go on to the rural areas? And the business said, no, the rural areas, people there can't afford our services. So the emerging role of philanthropy today is not just to give itself up and say, I have $100, I'll give all of it as $100. Philanthropy is changing so much. Philanthropy is testing new models, it's testing new markets, it's taking the risk to build sustainable models. So in this case, what did philanthropy do? A foundation came and said, okay, we'll fund your risk to go and test your model in the rural areas. We'll pay you to build your first office, we'll pay you to hire your first people, we'll pay you to kind of do the capex for that move. These guys went out, they fully funded by the philanthropic organization. They tried this model for 2 years and found out, actually, with a few tweaks, we can make money. A risk they never have taken on their own, because the private investors would look at that and think, no, we don't want to go there. And suddenly, they built a model that then scaled across the whole country. So now what we did there is that we blended grant capital with follow-on private capital in a model that traditionally would not have happened. That collaboration will never have happened. So there's a whole emerging space of innovative finance that underneath which you find things like impact investing, blending finance, where we're looking at things like outcome-based financing, that is opening up a whole new channel of how we look at delivering impact. And that's why I said, in today's world, you can still do well as you do good. And by building financially sustainable models that are serving people through cost-effective deliveries of services and products, without necessarily breaking the bank and being unaffordable, but providing financial returns for some of these businesses as well. So you have no excuse today not to move more into this purpose space as an organization.
Mm-hmm. I wish we could spend more time on this collaboration element, because I think it really is quite critical, and that's the only way to go forward now. But we may have to devote a whole other webinar to that. But for now, you spoke a lot about risk, and I think it is important for companies to take on that risk, and it's more of that external risk. But coming back to internal risk taking, we have a question from Olivia, who's asking, how can we trigger this mindset of taking risks in a company, or build a culture that sees failure as learning and opportunity and not as a loss?
Okay, that's a good question, Olivia. I think there's, as I said, the graveyard is littered with organizations that didn't do enough to evolve. And there's an opportunity cost of not necessarily testing new things. And one of the things I always tell people, there's no expert on the future. We don't know what we don't know about tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the only way you can know about tomorrow is to test and experiment with new things. Mm-hmm. And if you try something and fail, you haven't failed, you've learned away. If you try something and succeed, then you go on. But the only way you can know one way of not doing something is by running experiments. And now, if the culture of experimentation is there, and a lot of organizations are doing it, you can actually deliberately budget for it and structure your organization to be an experimental organization, where one of the ways you measure people is how many failures have you had, how many things have you tried, and how many failures have you had. If you're not failing enough, you're not trying enough. Wow. And you're rewarded for the number of experiments you run. Okay, you're measured and tracked for the number of experiments you run, because in that whole process is learning. is learning. Okay,
Yeah.
but so failure has to be structured and has to be embedded in the performance structure of the organization and how we go about running the business. We can't just say, oh, we'll embrace failure, but we don't reward people who succeed through failure, who test assumptions, and then we crucify them when they fail.
Mm-hmm.
No, and as I mentioned to you about Amazon, they fail a lot more than they succeed, but you never see that.
Yeah.
It's so much cheaper to fail at a small scale because you fail early, fail fast, fail cheap. That's the model you use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you're deliberate about designing experiments, you fail early, you fail fast, you fail cheap. And through that, if you succeed, then to scale those successes becomes much more easy. And the corporate then backs you with the right resources in terms of money and people. But you can't go hoping that by chance you'll run into these opportunities tomorrow. You've got to be deliberate about it. And there's an opportunity cost big time if you don't do it. And that's where you're finding a lot of the organizations today that are in the top 20 or top 30 of the Fortune 500 are very young organizations. But a common thread amongst all of them is they've embraced failure. They're experimenting organizations, they're learning, and they're failing forward through their processes.
Right, right. I suppose one other way of looking at it as well is it's almost like when you're lifting weights, you can't start with trying to bench press 100 kgs or lift. So I think most people try and bite off more than they can chew, and they hadn't factored in all the other variables. So perhaps it's, you start with the 5 kg weight and, you master that. Then you move on to the 7, then the 10 and 15, and you gradually grow. You grow that muscle of failing in a safe and, sustainable way, actually, because you're actually growing that muscle at the same time.
Yeah, and you structure that process deliberately. Yeah. You structure it as part of your ways of doing business. Okay, you don't leave it as that thing that is optional for people. You need to ask people, for example, various departments should be testing different models of delivering value to your external stakeholders, of testing value propositions and doing those kind of things. But do it in small phases. As I said, fail early, fail fast, fail cheap. So that even if you failed, no one will remember or notice that it goes. I mean, I used to work, when I worked at the African Leadership Academy, I used to tell kids, you're only 18. Try stuff. If I talk to my 18-year-old now, that I didn't try enough things. Try stuff. If you fail, you're just another 18-year-old. If you succeed, you're on the front pages tomorrow. Right. You're only 18. You've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And we need to be organizations that are comfortable being uncomfortable with failure.
Right. Wow. Excellent takeaways there. And we are fast running out of time. So maybe just as we close off this webinar, Frank, maybe you can just share with us, any business trends and best practices that you've noticed in this area of social investment and social impact.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is the involvement of the private sector in social investments, and not as that CSR kind of thing. Is there is opportunities in solving problems today. Okay, but you've got to be deliberate in embedding yourself in actually having a different mindset to come into this space with. We're seeing a lot more private sector. In fact, the big initiative now, even with things like the big foundations, are now thinking about how do we become more deliberate in collaborating with the private sector and corporates. This is the time for you to start thinking to yourself, who are the partners we need to be looking at to work with in this space? So go look at a consortium called the C3 Consortium, the Catalytic Capital Consortium, that was formed by Omidyar, MacArthur, and Rockefeller. They put together $150 million, and that is all what we call catalytic capital that is being used to de-risk social investments. I think I was reading the other day that they put in about $40 million in India, and they crowded in $1 billion to build 10,000 mini grids to supply electricity to 22 million people. Wow. Okay, and there's a lot of case studies on their website about just how they're using these grants to de-risk social investments and collaborating with the private sector to put in capital. So as corporates, think about how do we change our mindset about how we invest and how we extract value, but and how we deliver purpose as well. Because it's the days of thinking that if we're going to deliver purpose, we can only do grants, and we're going to lose our gun. Today, you can deliver purpose with profit. They're not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely. So it's really all about having a different mindset, a different approach, and collaboration. I think we definitely cannot run away from that now.
Yeah. And the final thing I want these people to also think about on the call is think about Africa as a sandbox for testing models. In human-centered design, they always say, test your models with extreme users. If your models can work in Africa, they'll work anywhere in the world. And we have exceptional impact opportunities. I don't call them problems. Exceptional impact opportunities in Africa where you can test new models that can be replicated across the world and scaled to many more countries. And if you need help, by all means, reach out to people like us. This is what we do for a living.
Wow, well, that's an excellent note to end on. Thank you so much, Frank, for making the time to speak to us today. And you shared such rich insights with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it. And I'm available. Follow me on Twitter, Aswani. Find me on LinkedIn. I'll be really keen to stay in touch with people because I can't see any of you right now, but I'm hoping we can stay in touch.
Absolutely. And many thanks to all of you who have tuned in live for this webinar. As you've heard for yourself, if you're not failing enough, you're not trying enough. So I hope that gives you some drive for this week as you approach your journey as a social entrepreneur. I hope today's session has helped you to get a better understanding of social entrepreneurship and the amazing opportunities and benefits that it holds for private corporations. Be sure to make time to read through and reflect on this week's course material so that you can go deeper on this subject as well. And remember, this is a safe space for learning, and you will get out of the course what you put in. So let's practice empathy with one another as we continue to discuss and engage meaningfully on the various course topics on the platform. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week, and goodbye for now.